Yeah, that won't do. How about this one? No. I'll tell you what, I'll just start the podcast. Hello, welcome back to... Sorry, that's not a good start, is that? I nearly said the wrong podcast title. I don't know, I'm going to leave this in. Hello, welcome back to my podcast, the Andrew Culture Podcast, but it's not a podcast about me, it's a podcast about the interesting people I know. And I have with me today somebody who is particularly interesting, not that previous guests haven't been, of course, somebody who's now pulling faces at my description of him. So his name is Mark Aaron. Mark, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Don't give too much away, otherwise we'll have nothing to talk about.
Okay. I left school with no qualifications. I defaulted into the arts because I was the kid that could draw, and I'm still doing that.
Brilliant. Thanks for being a guest. And next time, okay. So let's unpick that just a little bit. So you are a local lad, and we're recording this in Ipswich. And just for the record, it's the 11th of August, 2020 when we're recording. Which I say is a caveat because we're bound to mention a few kind of current events. So were you at school in Ipswich?
Yes, I went to Westbourne.
Oh, Westbourne. Okay. So at what point while you're at Westbourne, was it a surprise that you left school with nothing, or was there a point at which you thought, I'm not so sure?
No, not really. I was, without going into too much detail, I was a very, very angry young man. And our family was hit with quite an awful tragedy, which resulted in me being an angry young man. And arrogantly, I was full of, kind of anger and ire and creative ideas, and wanted to change the world through graphic design and all those kind of things. And I felt that school, even though I was enjoying it, even though I was really, really enjoying the arts and languages and science and almost anything, I kind of consumed it. When it actually came to sort of like knuckling down and doing some exams, I just went, no, I can't be asked with that. I'm going to go and do something else.
So you knew
they can't teach me to do what I want to do.
So it sounds like from quite a young age you knew you wanted to be a designer. There know several designers, and it's not normally something that people know that early.
I think even that was an act of rebellion. My father was infamously a musician and played with lots of very, very famous people. And there is this story which was on the cover of the East Anglian couple of years ago, because he threw Bowie out of the band.
Oh, wow.
In 1966. And he was a single dad as well, to me, as an only child. And he was a musician, and he was gigging and that sort of stuff. And he taught me to play guitar, and he bought me a piano and put me in an orchestra aged 9. So I learned to read music. I learned the tenor horn. And the act of going into design was a rebellion, believe it or not, about being a musician.
Wow, that must be.
It's like, no, I'm gonna own my own arts. I'm not, I'm always going to be competing with you if it's music.
That still seems like a fairly. I don't think I know anyone else who rebelled away from music. Kind of most of my friends in bands or most musicians either come from a musical family and it's just the way it is, or in my family, bless them, not a bean of musicality between them. Used to craze me actually. My sister played flute, so that was regarded as a proper instrument.
Right. Okay.
With funding, but I still do play guitar, which wasn't a proper. I love my family if they listen to this. I've got nothing against them at all, but it's just kind of quite interesting to hear someone rebelling away from music.
Yeah, I rebelled against it. It was. Even though my father never disagreed with any of my musical choices, and I was kind of listening to all sorts of stuff that you wouldn't normally, I think most 11, 12, 13-year-olds wouldn't be listening to. So music was the normal, if that makes sense. And so that was what I rebelled against, and I rebelled against by going into the kind of visual arts.
Can you remember what because I know it was such a young age that you decided kind of that you wanted to get into design, but can you remember there being a spark? Can you remember there being something in particular that influenced you or caught your eye and sort of really turned you onto it?
It's really naff, but I really liked album art.
Right.
Album art was what was getting me. So I remember, I mean, you know, not want to sound like this shows my age actually, is that you know, I remember doing a paper round and getting my £5 for the week and going straight down to Parrot Records and blowing the lot. And I was turned by covers. And I would pore over sleeve notes, and I would kind of absorb the whole experience of actually purchasing music, as opposed to just going, oh, I like that tune on the radio or on Spotify, and I'm going to put it on repeat or whatever. You know, it was an entirely different immersive experience. So, you know, early on, I really liked the work of Roger Dean with all the Yes album covers and that sort of stuff. I thought that was amazing when I was a 12 or 13.
Quite high concept things then, not, you know, I mean, from a graphical kind of point of view, quite complex kind of artwork, not kind of the band sat in front of a camera, but kind of very, very broad concept, very
yeah. I mean, it was really, you know, it was really deep and cosmic and mystical and that sort of stuff. But then I don't want to say that was a kind of, because it wasn't a high point necessarily, and I don't like that art now particularly, although I can appreciate the thinking and the skill that's gone into it. It wasn't until I probably bought Anarchy in the UK when I was 12, and then just loved all of the way that anyone could do it. And I think that was also reflected not only in the music. You know, the Clash got together, they could play two chords, you know, it's but it was also reflected in the graphic art. And actually the graphic art was very clever. You know, it was made to look very ripped up and torn and last minute and those sorts of things, but actually it wasn't. So some of it was quite ingenious.
Okay, so with punk, you know, famously it broke down the borders and it showed that music was something that anybody can do, and I'd never really considered kind of the artistic side of that. Was that the moment you kind of thought, this is for me, or were you kind of looking at the Yes album covers going, I'm going to draw like that's the concept?
No, I think I was still going Yes album covers. It wasn't until Neville Brody and his work with the face and all those kind of wonderful all the strange typography and stuff like Talking Heads and all the new wave CBGB New York scene that then had a graphic language that accompanied the music. And that's the bit that really turned my head, I think.
Okay, so
that was kind of like, that was late 70s, early 80s. That was the point where I thought, I'm actually finding a route here, which I find accessible. And
would it be uncouth for me to ask how old you were at that time?
15.
15, okay. So were you mimicking these things? Because kids in bands play tennis rackets and sing into hairbrushes. So from a graphical kind of perspective, was this something you were mimicking, or did you just dive straight into it?
I went straight in. I mean, in fact, I was close friends with a guy called Nigel Budinger, and we started a fanzine called Negative Reaction. So that was my kind of first graphic job. And I think, in fact, I might have been 13 or 14 then. And we used to sell it in Parrot Records.
I genuinely say this podcast isn't about me, but it genuinely was a turning point in my life, was finding fanzines in, well, what was Rex Records by the time I was kind of coming up. And it was, I'd heard from the music, I'd heard punk and never saw how people thought it was dumb. I always thought it was just a very efficient kind of type of music. And then finding the fanzines, and I'm trying to remember, they were Shooting Jism. Okay, there's always been loads of fanzines with
there's loads of
Zombie. I think there's always been fanzines with kind of
one. And there was a whole little scene there around the Addicts and Jar Warriors and Woden Forge and all these kind of General R and the Meanies. There was all these bands knocking around as well, and we were all doing badges and posters for them and fanzines and articles and that sort of stuff.
So you mentioned one name there, which it's a band that's still going and still very well known outside of Ipswich, and that's the Addicts. Yeah. So I kind of know the answer for this, so I'm kind of teasing you along like podcast hosts do. Okay. How associated with the Addicts were you? Did that open any opportunities?
Not particularly.
Oh, right. No. I thought you did some of their artwork.
I did. I did. I mean, I've done artwork for bands like Hawkwind and things like that. I mean, that is. I don't really. I mean, of all the things that I've designed, I haven't really done that much music. And I've done a few significant things which I'm quite proud of, but you know, as a designer, you work across the spectrum. Although I'm passionate about that. I'm passionate about art and music and how it fits together, creates narratives, and all of that.
Okay, so instilled with the attitude of anybody can do this, obviously thinking that and making your own things with fanzines and making posters and art, cover art for bands is one thing, but it can be quite a difficult leap from that point, the enthusiasm, to actually making it something that allows you to buy food and put a roof over your head. So how did you manage to make that leap? I think that's the crucial bit a lot of people struggle with.
I didn't. I think I've stuck around and it's kind of happened by default because I've refused to quit. You know,
well, it's a method. That's a method.
Early on, I kind of slept on friends' couches, and eventually, aged 20, I think I got a job with a local design agency. And I thought, yeah, I'm in. I'm going to change the world with graphic design. And of course, I didn't. I was relegated to making tea and being a paste-up artist and learning how to draw type. And
okay, paste-up artist.
All very corporate and all very wide shoulder pad, kind of fast car, too much drugs, all that. And I hated it.
In Ipswich?
Oh, yeah. I went to London after that, but, you know, even in Ipswich, it was a bit kind of aspiring.
Wow.
I remember our managing director was like a massive fan of Level 42, and I'm not slating Level 42, but there is a massive gap between I'm listening to Patti Smith, but I've got to design in the style of Level 42. That was, so there's a kind of, you have to kind of swallow. You learn, I suppose what I learned was humility at that point, rather than sort of like slating anything off. You know, the money has to come from somewhere, and you know, you're trying to live and be an artist and a graphic artist and a musician and all those kind of things. So you just take the money where it comes from and the leads and opportunities where they arise.
Was there a point at which you say that you accepted the fact that if you're going to earn money and put a roof over your head as a designer, there were certain things you were going to have to do? So you learnt some humility. I mean, did you not get disheartened, or did you kind of, how did you find your way through that?
I've been sacked on a few occasions and, you know, been angry, inappropriate with clients, you know, swearing and saying this is bullshit and all those kind of things, you know, because I was, as I say, you know, still got that pocket full of anger, I think, you know, somewhere, that little well of creativity. You just think, sorry, I'm not putting up with this. I'm not doing it. I'm far more professional now. So I probably was in my early 30s.
Wow, so it's a significant length of time then.
Yeah, no, I stuck it out all during my 20s. And it was in my early 30s that I decided to stick two fingers up to it all and just go out on my own and decide who was going to be my client, who wasn't going to be my client.
So that is a brave thing. Kind of part of the reason for this podcast is I'd like to kind of slightly patronizing to say I want to inspire people to kind of quit what they're doing or to at least follow their passion. But so you stuck with the corporate thing for 10 years. Was there a final straw, or was it just kind of a building of resentment?
No, I don't think so. I'd worked on some really, really nice stuff in London. I mean, you know, big car brands and all sorts of things, or big consumer brands that you would know. And I felt that within the agency I was in, I was kind of being marginalized and was sidelined. And I thought that there is a system within the agency culture where you knew that wherever you were, they were very keen on taking bright ideas out of university or college and burning people out with pressure and the lifestyle. And I mean, this is the 80s, remember, 80s, 90s. And then seeing younger people than me actually kind of blow up and not being able to cope. And I thought, well, I'm in quite a fortunate position because I've got my feet under the table and I'm in there. But actually, this is a bullshit culture. And actually, that's not where I want to be. That's really not where I want to be. But I have this set of skills. I have learned how to do this. I can draw. I can, you know, I had written jingles and all sorts of things. I had directed ads. There was all sorts of skill, a big skill set that I'd acquired. And I thought, well, you know, if I'm ever going to do something, if I'm ever going to jump and actually take a risk, then this is the point to do it. So I did.
Okay, so did you stick with London for that, or did you head back?
Yeah, well, in fact, I was already back here and commuting, and I hated that bit as well. And in actual fact, I would go down to London on a Monday morning and come back on a Friday night. So I was sort of like back in Suffolk at the weekends. And the real catalyst, if I'm completely truthful, was that I became a single father.
Okay.
And that was not that was the bit that actually pushed me over the edge. So all of these ideas I've been thinking about for, you know, a year or 18 months or whatever, and all of a sudden I ended up in a situation where I've got a 3 and a 4-year-old.
Wow.
And I'm on my own with a 3 and a 4-year-old.
So yeah, that's quite a catalyst. So were you facing kind of just a dark void of no work, or did you manage to kind of line some things up when you went freelance?
I was contacted by I had no work for about 4 or 5 months, although I'd picked up a few from some friends still in the industry, had sort of like, you know, chucked me a few things. So I'd worked on a pitch for Tesco for the rebrand of their. In fact, it wasn't the rebrand; it was the brand of what became their clothing range.
Okay.
So I was working on things like that, and so I was working on that as a freelancer, but it wasn't really sustainable. And then a friend that I'd worked with within the industry turned around and said, "Oh, Mark, we're working on a couple of shows for a small little TV company, and it needs some art direction and it needs some design, and there's quite a team here. They've got a couple of agencies involved and all that sort of stuff, but we'd really like you to come involved." And it was a bit of a favour, really, because the guy just turned around and said, "Oh, you know, Mark's had a bit of a rough time. He's a single dad. He's moved back to Suffolk, you know, and we always enjoyed working with him. So come up." And, so I did. So I worked on a couple of shows, and one of them was a biggie, you know, and I had no idea when it happened. I had no idea that it was going to be. It was a year later, once they started broadcasting, that when you
say you worked on them, so what we've heard so far is that you're kind of primarily a graphic designer, but you've also kind of directed adverts and done some other bits and bobs. So what was it you were actually doing for the TV companies?
I was designing logos for brands for shows.
Oh, right. So if a show came along and needed an identity,
and how's it going to look? You know, create a palette, a mood board, and sit and work with the producers, sit and work with the director, sit and work with marketing, the marketing arm of this particular TV company, which at the time was a guy called Adrian Wolf, who had been a Radio 1 DJ and had presented Top of the Pops in his prime. So I worked with him and a small team, and we developed, you know, some brands that you would know today, sort of thing.
Cool.
You know.
So one of the things, I'm a writer, and one of the things I like when I write something is I still get a kick out of seeing it published in a magazine. So how was it kind of sitting back and watching TV? Were you able to enjoy the productions you worked on? Were you thinking, God, they shouldn't have changed?
You know, I had one broadcast this weekend, a new show that I designed. I've worked on.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what it was?
No, shit.
Yeah. Okay. We'll maybe. Kind of...
It's called Rolling It. I shouldn't say that, should I? No, that's really unfair. So I worked on a show called Rolling in It, and that was broadcast on ITV on Saturday, I think, Saturday or Sunday at 6 o'clock. Saturday, I think, at 6 o'clock.
So kind of, we're recording 11th of August, so some point at the beginning of August on ITV in 2020.
That's right.
Just in case kind of your grandchildren are listening back to this and trying to trace their genealogy or something. Okay, so you've left London. Managed to kind of get some work, kind of do some freelance stuff. Mm-hmm. Was the temptation to kind of go back to employment, or was it just not a practical possibility?
No. I've got the taste for it. I've got the taste for being completely, you know, kind of master of realizing that I could actually continue juggling kind of home life as being a single dad, and paying the mortgage and still working. And actually what I found is that it was a more satisfying and creative process. It allowed me to think and breathe and work. The thing is that when I became a single dad, I had to put all sorts of things in place in order for me to continue working in London. And I could see that it wasn't going to work. And my bosses could see that it wasn't going to work. Now, this was 22 years ago. I was more than that. Sorry, it was 25 years ago. There was nothing in place to protect me. This wouldn't happen now. We have better work practices and I hope morals, but back then it was like, sorry, you can't fulfill your job, off you go.
This thing, I was just trying to think just on a mechanical level. I'm a parent myself, I'm not a single parent, but just trying to think, and I've worked in London, I've commuted as well. I can't see how that would even, I'm kind of amazed you did it for even a short period of time. It must have been incredible. I'm sitting here, I can't get my words straight because I can't get an image in my head of how you would have even started to do that.
It was very, very tiring. It actually kind of burnt me out.
I'm not surprised.
And I had a girlfriend in Brighton at the time as well, which was kind of complicated matters even more.
You don't do things easily, do you? Have you mellowed in kind of later years, or do you still like crazy challenges?
Oh, I appear mellow, but there's a kind of raging chaos going on all around me.
do you think that's synonymous with creativity, or is it fuel it, or does it just?
That's a very big question, actually, because I think I mean it might be specific, it might be unique to me, or other people might find this is true, but actually you need a little bit of instability, and you need to have things in your life that are beyond your comfort zone. And actually the best things tend to happen from a creative point of view when you push yourself out of your comfort zone. So whether it is we're just talking about the creative process, or we're talking in a wider context about somebody's life, I think there's a little bit of me that thrives in an environment where it's a little bit unstable. It's a little bit unstable, and because you can grow things that people don't expect out of that kind of chaos, if that makes sense.
I'm inclined to agree. I don't know very many very relaxed, very chill creative people. I mean, I class myself as creative, but people kind of perhaps see me from the outside and see my work may not believe so, but I thrive on crazy stress. One of the most fun things I've ever done was building an exhibition stand in Munich with German forklift drivers who were in my way and refused to speak English. They did speak English, but they wouldn't speak English to me. I had a Moldovan truck driver with my equipment on the truck who was very angry with me because he was supposed to be driving back to Poland. I had a Polish guy's truck that had broken down, blocking the entrance, and there was another couple of languages worth of people, all these people yelling at me, and I absolutely loved it. I think I got a massive migraine afterwards, but at the time, absolutely loved it. And I think it's kind of see myself as more of a musician. I think it's the very act of standing up and performing in front of somebody is a dumb thing to do. It's a fairly stupid, stressful thing to do that you don't need to have thrust upon you. But we do it because it's
metaphorical. You're putting yourself in the stocks.
Say that again?
You're putting yourself in the stocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like waiting to be pelted with rotten fruit because you're trying to say, "Hey, everyone, I can do this," and people are assholes.
Well, unfortunately, they are. Yeah, I mean, I don't tour so much anymore, but I've had some terrible, terrible times that have been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, well, I think that's important. I think that's important. So a lot of what I do, I think, is also putting my hand up sometimes and saying, and I think this is a formula for success. It sounds trite, but it's kind of don't rest on your laurels. If you see an opportunity, if you see a job come up and you think, I don't quite know how to do that, there is a technical aspect to it that I'm not familiar with, or there is a timing issue, or there is some friction in accepting the job. But if you accept the job, then you realize that actually you've taken on a greater responsibility than is immediately evident. And it's that, for me, where the kind of creativity comes from. And also what happens is you end up with a bag full of skills.
Mm. Yeah, so it's very hard to kind of choose. Sorry, it's very hard to choose new skills if you're not put in a situation like that. But just to be clear to anyone listening, we're not giving you the golden goose here. It can sometimes go horrifically wrong. Generally, if I get offered a job, especially a creative job, my first instinct is my reaction is, if my first instinct is hell no, I know it's something I've got to do. But that doesn't mean it goes well.
That's great advice. I really like that.
Well, it's true, because otherwise it's a system of diminishing returns. If you stay in your comfort zone, the amount of new things you're prepared to accept will get lower and lower and lower until I can't think of what the worst job for a designer would be. But
I think I wouldn't even say categorize myself as a designer, really, because from a creative point of view, I get involved in so many different things. So, I'm still directing, I'm still writing scripts, I'm still animating, I'm still building things in 3D, I'm still writing music. We've got the local feature film coming out imminently, which I've scored.
What's that called?
The Haunted Hotel.
Okay.
And so, but all of those things all come from the same place, and the only difference between them is the technology or the skill in order to deliver them. So if you need to do that thing, like play that piano riff, go and learn it. If you need to learn how to code that thing, go and learn it. It's all out there, and you can do it. But it starts off in here, inside, in your head or whatever. And you think, I kind of know how that should look. I've got a feeling for it. And then you go on this adventure.
And part of that is one of the things I really enjoy about being freelance is the ability to do that, because if you're freelance, you're not necessarily commoditized in the same way you are as an employee. So when I worked in London, I was very politely commoditized into, this is what you do, this is what your role, and the people who are surrounding me sometimes they'd use that awful phrase, "Oh, it's not my job, that's not in my job description." Whereas I kind of think being alive is pretty much having the job, and then everything else is, do what it takes. If I'm asked what I do, I tend to say, well, I do what it takes. Makes it more difficult to kind of create adverts.
You talk about, that sounds very risky, and it sounds kind of slightly risky from a client's point of view. But from experience, always employ people who are smarter than you.
Oh, absolutely.
Employ people smarter than you, and if you can't do the job, you will know someone who does know how to do it. So you might not make the margins on it, you might not make the profit on it, or whatever. But what you don't do is you don't let the client down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's an amateur job or if it's a big TV thing or whatever, there's a level of kind of professionalism that you take on straight away and say, it is going to be delivered by this particular date. That's sorry, it's only got very, very professional there.
No, that came dangerously close to giving advice, kind of between the two of us there. Okay, so kind of the story, let's take back up the story. So early 30s, you kind of quit being in London every day to raise your kids and start to build, what the phrase is, would portfolio career be a safe thing to say?
I built a portfolio. I mean, I had this big TV show under my belt. And weirdly, that still opens doors, even now.
Great.
It's and even though I've done lots and lots of other shows and stuff, and all sorts of things. Like I had a big job earlier this year, which was designing a ball at the Grosvenor just before lockdown. And actually, it literally was 2 weeks before lockdown that it happened. And that was all the literature, the print, the animations, the projected 3D things that were happening, and the whole lot.
So how does it work for you now? Because obviously you've been freelance for quite a while now. Mm-hmm. Do you find the majority of work comes from a small group of people, or do you have a very diverse?
No, it's a small group of people.
So without wishing to put words in your mouth, would you say it's fair to say if you do the absolute best job you can, then people come back?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sort of accidentally trying to prep someone who's currently, if anyone's listening to this and they are in kind of the battery hen equivalent of the design world, kind of, sitting at the end of a long row of desks churning out things they hate. I want to show people that there is another way.
Yeah, and I think I've made some inroads that have been lucky, and a lot of it is kind of, I know it sounds awful, but it's very difficult now, but kind of networking, really. It's but it seems to have happened by accident. I've done a particularly good job on a particular product. People have remembered it, and they've put you in a box, and they've still commodified you. They're going to pick up the phone and go, "Oh, Mark is the guy that does that thing. Oh, we've got a new one now. Oh yeah, where's my list of numbers? Oh yeah, phone Mark," and that's it. You've got the gig.
You have hit on something which I think is really interesting, or very important actually, especially for freelancers. And the same thing exists playing in bands. Kind of sometimes, a while ago, somebody young in a band said, "How do you get gigs? How come you've got gigs?" And I said, "Well, you just speak to people."
Yeah.
Just all the people. You don't have to necessarily go to formal networking events, although some of those can be quite fun. Some of them are absolutely terrible. But if you just speak to people, if you're prepared to speak to people, and you don't have to have something insightful. I found a lot of people, if you've got nothing to say, if you're just prepared to listen to someone, that makes a really good impression. You don't have to be kind of some suave social genius to make a good impression on people. It's probably more important to be yourself, actually, more than anything.
I tend to agree with you, and also, don't miss the deadline and do a great job. I think I can't think there's no other advice I can give. And don't miss the deadline.
Sounds fairly good to me. So
deliver. That's it.
So it sounds like it's all been, I wouldn't say it's all been fine, because I know it's been difficult over the last however many years. But I was going to ask you if you'd have it any other way, but I think that's a redundant question, kind of.
What? So it had any?
If you would have done it any other way, but I think it's probably a redundant question.
It's by accident. It happened by accident. I mean, there was a big campaign I got very heavily involved with about 10 years ago. And that opened up a significant amount of doors. And it wasn't my intention that it would do that. And that was the campaign to save BBC Radio 6Music.
Oh, I didn't know you were involved with that.
So I was heavily involved in that.
Oh, thanks for that.
Organising gigs and going on all the protests and negotiate. There was a small team of about 15 of us that did the whole thing, really. So we had I think it was a guy called John Morter, and I'm friends with his wife, Tracy Morter, who incidentally took the photograph of Nils Fram on the cover of Space's album, but that's another story. So, anyway, so John Morter John and Tracy were behind the getting Rage Against the Machine to #1 to beat Simon Cowell. And then when the news about BBC Radio 6Music being closed was announced, somebody within the BBC created a Facebook group, made John and Tracy admins, and then quit.
Oh, really?
And within 2 weeks, there were like 140,000 members of this Facebook group. and because somebody knew me and I'd done stuff for bands, and I was working with a guy called William Doyle at the time, who's was in a band called East India Youth.
Oh yeah,
he was nominated. They were nominated for a Mercury, so I was working with him, doing his artwork and design and stuff. And they just said, "Oh, we're going to need some posters, and we're going to need campaign slogans, and we're going to need campaigns and headers to go on Twitter and all sorts of stuff." So that they sort of pulled me in, and I ended up just by default part of this small core team that were coordinating all the info coming from management companies and bands, and then feeding it out to John Plunkett in the Media Guardian to kind of keep the story as alive as we possibly could. At the same time, we're BBC management are trying to ban us on Twitter, and we're trying to have a protest in London, and we've got loads of kind of quite high-profile comedians and radio DJs and people saying they're going to play for us, and the police contacting us saying, if anybody plays a note, we're going to arrest you all.
It's all very punk rock for kind of an establishment kind of thing.
For somebody in my, I thought, God, I haven't been on a process since I was 15. Rock against racism and anti-Nazi League and all that sort of stuff, which I was, sort of quite obviously naturally involved with as part of the kind of early punk scene.
I think it was kind of totally the making of 6Music though, because I hadn't listened until that point, and it kind of raised the profile of it to such an extent that I know a lot of my friends who still listen to 6Music, that was what kind of turned it on to them. And I think it also like to think it made 6Music a lot more independent of the kind of the higher echelons of the BBC as well.
What happened is it made them untouchable. And actually, I tell you what we did. A friend of mine and I, a chap called Chris Wiper, who was best man at a wedding, actually, we put together a website with a survey on it, and we directed all of the Facebook and Twitter feeds towards getting people to fill out this survey. And basically what we proved is that for every £1 the BBC is spending on promoting new bands and playing new music on 6Music, it was creating £13 for the UK economy in terms of people attending gigs and people, and we presented that information and this body of signatories to the BBC. We were invited to the BBC and had a meeting with Tim Davey, who's now he's now Director General, I believe.
Oh, really? He's a good person to get on your side.
And so the director of the God, I'm so terrible with names now. It's so long ago. It's 10 years ago. Basically, they invited us, and I think they expected a bunch of kind of hippies to turn up, and actually we all turned up very smartly dressed and all very well rehearsed, and presented these kind of cogent, lawyerly arguments that were all kind of cultural based. And the BBC Trust, the head of the BBC Trust, turned around and in that meeting and said, "We're not shutting it.
Wow.
We're not closing it. The BBC management have not made the case for closing it down." I mean, we were in the right place at the right time. It was effortless, really. The groundswell of opinion against the BBC management trying to close it. Facebook, everything happened all at the right time. I'm wondering whether if Facebook and Twitter hadn't been around, whether we've actually managed to do it. And at the same time, it was also an innocent time for those social media platforms, because I think it was the first time that we know of that a campaign had been managed and launched almost entirely via social media.
Which is, now we would not be that surprising. But I can remember it being a real big deal. It probably helped make Twitter and Facebook as well, to a certain extent.
I've no idea, but it was a real big thing. So to be at the centre of that, and then again, once it had been saved, we had this big protest planned for October the 2nd, I think it was. And we turned it into a big celebratory gig. So we had, Stiff Little Fingers, and we had the Specials, and we had, loads of DJs, and, all the DJs from 6, and I can't remember, Magic Numbers played.
Oh, yeah.
And then some really left field stuff like the Toy Orchestra guys. Do you know them? They do all this electronic stuff with toys.
I don't, but I'm going to look them up now.
They did an amazing set. Craig Charles did this amazing set. We were late at night. We were all absolutely off our faces at this point. But that again, we all made a lot of connections, and that's not been a bad thing for my career, even though it wasn't intended to be a networking event.
That's the thing, kind of this isn't my work podcast, but the phrase I use at work is all the time is make the web a better place. And I think it fits in for, well, not just any creative industry, but any industry. Have a growth. There's a new phrase, the growth mindset. Have a growth mindset and do good stuff. That's pretty much it. That sums up a lot.
I'll be honest with you. And even the 6Music campaign, sadly, my father passed away the year before. And I was angry. I was angry when they said they're going to shut it. I went, no, this 6Music was like a bridge between me and my father. We would sit and listen to it, and I would tell him about shows or tracks to listen to, and he would do the same to me, going, "Oh, I bet you don't know that riff from so and so and so is based on a Wilson Pickett thing from
Awesome.
1962 or something." You know, so 6Music was this kind of fulcrum for me and my father, and then he passed away. So then when they shut it down, it felt really, really personal. So,
it was. I think attitude. I think a lot of British people, the attitude we have to the BBC is it's ours. It's absolutely ours. Don't take it away. Don't mess with it too much. It's ours. You know, whenever my own personal opinions, that whenever they talk about the license fee being taken away, I don't do it, because it's one of the few radio stations in the world that isn't overtly commercially led. Obviously, they need to make money, and they do make money, a lot of money. Through franchise and syndicating it to other countries. But you can't mess with it because it's not yours, the government. It's ours. This is our thing. We, the people, have ownership over it. So I'm going to proper kind of socialist tendencies now, but I think it's true.
It's socialist, and I think there's something to be said for being sort of like slightly anti-democratic about it. And I think sometimes you just need a platform for people to just put stuff out. The people who are broadcasting on 6, even now, are really passionate about what they do. They really spend a lot of time listening to records.
Yeah, absolutely.
They really spend a lot of time thinking about what they're saying and constructing their shows and all the rest of it. And yes, there is a playlist. Yes, there's an A list, an A playlist, a B playlist, a C playlist, and there are shades of commercialism creeping into that. But by and large, I'm going to listen to that, and I'm going to hear stuff every day that I've never heard before.
Absolutely. And there's people like Tom Robinson still kind of finding. He played my band These Are End Times very, very kindly. I don't think he got it. He said some people like this, but I don't know why, and then played it, which we were happy with. It's like being accepted, but also maintaining your slight proggy elitism, which my bandmates would all disagree with, I think. But and of course,
play violin for you.
Cad, yes, mutual. Right. Do you know what? The amount of podcasts I've recorded where Cad's name comes up.
I'll mention him again.
This is Cad Taylor.
I love her to bits. Let's leave it there.
Well, I've got her coming in. Well, potentially. Sorry, Cad, I love you if you hear this, but I've got Cad coming in potentially for an interview. It'll happen when it happens. She's a great free spirit and cheerleader who I look forward to getting onto the podcast. But yeah, no, Cad is a bandmate of mine. She plays violin in These Are End Times.
Fantastic.
Yes. So, Mark, way over the target length for this episode, but don't apologise.
One question, and we just go.
Oh no, that's great. I think this may be part one. We have to get you back at some point. So, how can people find out more about you? Do you want people to find out more about you?
Well, I don't know really. I mean, I've got a website, but it's like 4 years old or something. It's
tell us where it is.
Because everything is word of mouth. I don't really maintain any social media presence or websites or anything from a professional point of view, because I'm kind of doing it for other people, if that makes sense. It's very difficult to work on your own stuff. No,
fair. I was going to include a link to your website in the show notes. Would you prefer if I didn't?
No, you can do. I mean, there's I've got a couple of things out there.
I'll tell you what, I'll send you, rather than kind of dealing this in the podcast recording, I'll send you a message afterwards. This is the thing. I think these podcasts are so... Say again?
I'm embarrassed by it.
Oh, well, that's...
It's one of those things, because it's mine. It's so personal, and it's like I'm really bad at self-promotion. I'm absolutely appalling at it. And
yet you've managed to stay as a busy freelancer for how many years? 20, more than 20 now?
Years, I think. 23 years, yeah.
Yeah, whatever you're doing appears to be working, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, I'm going to wrap it up there. And
thank you very much for indulging me and letting me rattle on.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to say goodbye. Do you want to say goodbye?
Yes. Goodbye, everyone.
Well, that's the end of this one. So, what do you think? Do you like it? I hope so. This is the kind of bit that you might be able to tell I just use the same bit every time because, well, it's not so much lazy as efficient, but this is the bit where I say smash the like button or stab at it or actually just stroke it gently. Be nice. Yeah, why would you be so aggressive? But please like, please subscribe, and please rank, rate, tell everyone. These kind of things, I assume they matter. Everyone else says them. But there you go. So endeth this episode of the Andrew Culture podcast. If you want to know more about what I get up to, go have a look at andrewculture.com because I won't bore you with it here. Anyway, until the next time, keep it cool, stand in a dry place, or do what you want. I'm not your boss. Bye.
We don't know for sure. Weather can be changeable.